At the bottom right-hand corner of our EAR triangle is A for activities. Now, there are 3 things that I want you to know about activities. And the first one is activities need to be appropriate. The second thing I want you to know is that activities need to be child-centered. And the final thing I want you to know here is that activities need to require some aspect of serve and return, that back and forth engagement between caregiver and child. Let's look a little bit closer about how activities need to be appropriate. The first thing that we're going to take a look at underneath activity is whether or not the activity is appropriate. Given what we know about your child's developmental age and the routines and the time of day, is the activity that you're asking your child to engage in, is it appropriate? For activities to be appropriate, we want them to be developmentally appropriate, time of day appropriate, physical environment appropriate, and personally appropriate. We want to be in the right headspace to be able to play the activity with our child. So for a 6-month-old, we're not going to give them watercolors in the buggy at Target because obviously it's not an environmentally appropriate activity or a developmentally appropriate activity for our child. Same reason why we wouldn't give our child a ride in the car whenever it's mealtime, because they're going to be hungry and fussy, because we want the activities to be appropriate. The second thing I want you to know about activities is that activities need to be child-centered. Now, I feel like sometimes child-centered activity gets kind of a bad rap if you don't understand exactly what that means. And basically, the way that you can think about that is that, let's say your child gets a toy for their birthday and it comes in this box, right? And instead of playing with that toy, your child just wants to play with the box. Letting that activity remain child-centered is letting the child play with the box instead of saying, no, don't play with the box, play with the toy I got you. Keeping an eye on what motivates your child to play. And play is what your child determines play to be. And that's what child-centered play is all about. Is that intrinsic motivation, what's inside your little one that gets them motivated to play and following their lead. That's what child-centered play is. So, activities need to be child-centered. And finally, the last thing I want you to know that all activities should have is an aspect of serve and return. Well, what do I mean by serve and return? Are we playing volleyball or tennis here? Not exactly, but we're talking about listening first and speaking later. That noticing and then responding, letting the child take the lead and responding to what it is the child does. It's as simple as playing peekaboo and your child initiating by placing their hands over their eyes and you saying the words peekaboo. You're building connections, neural connections in the brain of consistency and reliability that every single time they put their hands up, they're going to play peekaboo with you. And every single time they drop something over the side of their high chair, you say, uh-oh. And you're building a connection in their brain that tells them the response that they're getting from you is reliable and consistent, which strengthens the bond that they have with you. Now, this serve and return isn't just for babies. Serve and return is really great for building that bond that lasts all the way up into high school. And believe me, I know I've got a couple of those high schoolers at home, and we've been practicing this since they were very, very small. This serve and return, this listening first and responding later, noticing and responding. It's an important part of that respect that you're building with your little one that starts right now in early infancy, even in those first few years of life, or those first few months rather of life, early. So serve and return is an important aspect of how you interact during activities with your little one. That serve and return, that back and forth interaction, that noticing and then responding is a huge part of how we interact during activities with our little one. In this video, we talked about the 3 things that activities need to have. Number 1, activities need to be appropriate. Number 2, activities need to be child-centered. And number 3, activities need to require some aspect of that serve and return. In our next video, we're going to dive in a little bit deeper and talk more about responses.